right, so chapter 12, speeches to inform. Let's highlight some really most key and important things for us today. We're living today, ladies and gentlemen, in an information age. In fact, we're absolutely overloaded with information. How many of you do not have enough information? Just think about it. We have too much information. Anything you want to know about, you can within seconds. That doesn't mean that the information you get is going to be good, right? You probably figured this out. Sometimes you're looking for very specific information and you can't find it that easily. You can find something about it, but you can't find that one specific piece of information you're looking for. And that goes with learning how to search for information. But information is not our problem, okay? We don't have a lack of information. The problem that people have is presenting information, or distilling that information, organizing that information, understanding that information, and making sense of it. That's what we have trouble with. We have trouble processing our information. And so a speech to inform is going to give you the same type of a challenge. You are not giving a speech to inform merely to unload information. Because if that what was people were doing, they could read a book. They can do something else. Why should they listen to you give them information about anything? Well, as we said, the role of orality, the role of public speaking, the role of live, real presentation by a human being is a very different feeling. And so that should be a good enough and a compelling enough reason for people to want to hear it from you. So we as speakers essentially give meaning to the information. Information is just it, facts. But what you and I do, we arrange it, we put it together, we explain it, we clarify it, we make a point with it. We give meaning to the information. That's what a speaker does. You see, internet can't do that for you. A YouTube video can do that. Why? Because YouTube video is actually a speech that would happen to be recorded in the video. But just punching in a bunch of questions into a computer is not going to give you exactly the type of information you're looking for. It's going to give you facts. It's going to give you data. But it's not going to be organized. It's not going to be meaningful. You're going to have to still figure it out. Well, that's what a speaker does. So the most common type of speech is a speech to inform. And what you hear in class every single day, every single time you come to class, what you hear, a lecture is typically a speech to inform. So you should be very familiar with that kind of speech. It's most common. So anytime somebody does a business presentation, a demonstration, anytime people get up and really try to explain how something works, that's what they're doing. They're doing a speech to inform. Now, given that information doesn't always come as a speech, not in that format, but whoever is putting that information together still has to write it and put it together. And so essentially they are composing a speech. They're just not always delivering it, okay? So basically you have these demonstration, you have explanations, you have lectures, you have different types of reports. Those are your most common types of speeches to inform. As I said, the ones that you're most familiar with is the explanatory speech, like a college lecture or any type of a school lesson or anything like that. That's where, we go through the text of this book together. You've read this book, you understand this book, you've already understood much of this content. Maybe some things are not 100% clear. And my hope is, by doing a lecture in class, is by hoping to cover some of the things that may have not been so clear to you, and to explain them further, give you examples, demonstrate. A lot of times, I'll get the board going, I'll start drawing pictures and trying to explain to you what am I really trying to say? What is this textbook really trying to say? So this is where the explanations really takes concepts and ideas and defines them and makes them a little bit more concrete. It gives you a way to put them into life, okay? So we make them relevant to the listener. So you may read this information and you say, this is not relevant to me, but I can make it relevant to you. If I know a little bit about your life, if I know a little bit about what you do, and then I can help you see how this information is actually useful to you. So that's what I mean. So lectures usually give you a lot of definitions, a lot of explanations about all sorts of ideas and concepts, and that is how many people learn, through listening. But lectures by themselves, see, if you didn't read the textbook, it would be very hard for me. Not that I couldn't do it, but it'd be very hard for me to make that information stick. You see, I believe that if you learn something by reading it and then I go over it in lecture, I think that information sticks better because I highlight the most important things I really want you to understand. And so it's like a second time repeating the same idea. And so it should, kind of stick a little bit better. And if it's really important and I repeat it, then you know that's something I really want you to know. And that means it has to do with the objective of this class. Because there's a lot of words on these pages. And so which are the most important? There are a lot of paragraphs. Which paragraphs could contain the key ideas, the key concepts? And I try to draw your attention to that. So one of these speeches to inform, and this is a very common version of it, is a demonstration. You probably have seen a demonstration, like a demonstration of a product or something like that. Now, a lot of times a product demonstration will be followed up by a speech to to persuade. Why? Because they're going to try to sell you on the stuff. But the first part of it is going to be to inform. They're going to explain to you, oh, look at this product, look what it does, look at it. Did you know that you have so much dirt in your carpet that you really need to buy this kind of vacuum? So there's all kinds of things you learn, as even if you're watching, a commercial or something like that. But essentially, people give demonstrations at work, their business presentations all the time. Obviously, Classroom is another version of that demonstration. You may also be asked to give a report. Report is another speech to inform. Report is much more formal than a lecture or a demonstration. Report is much more stringent, where you are being asked to present certain kind of data, certain kind of information in certain kinds of ways, and you're essentially answering a lot of times a need or a request for information. You've gathered all this information and now you're presenting it. And now, so reports in that sense can be a little bit more boring because they're very specific. What kind of a report can there be? A lot of times somebody would request a study be done at work. Let's say a business can do a study on its employees. They could say, how come our productivity is such and such and such? Or they can say, why do women who go into maternity leave don't come back, or something like that? And they'll do a study and they'll start researching it, and then somebody will come in and do a report on what it is that they learned. They'll go over massive amounts of information and then they'll combine it all together, and they're not going to give that same information to everyone, what they picked up. They're going to take the best of what they found, the most important things, analyze it, and nicely package it in a simple presentation and say, okay, we spent 3 months studying this, and here's the answer to this question. The best we can tell, this is why this happens at work. This is why productivity is down. This is why the sales are down. This is why this. And so a lot of times people will do these types of reports. And a lot of times these reports are oral. Now, you'll have some visual media, you'll have presentations, you have numbers, but you still have to stand in front of people and present it. So you may have a committee, you may have a boardroom, you may have a bunch of just bosses sitting out there listening, say, I want to know why our company's not doing well. We hired you to give us some answers. Come on, give us some answers. So that happens. So that's another aspect or another type of speech to inform. A bit more formal. You don't have as much freedom there because you are actually answering a very specific questions. Now, something the author says very important on page 191 that I wanted to highlight for you. He writes, they write this in his chapter, right in the middle of page 191. Your goal as an informative speaker is to make it easy for your listeners to retain your information. And then they say there's 5 things that you can do to make sure that happens, okay? The 5 things is strive for clarity, associate new ideas with familiar ones, cluster ideas, and then construct strong visualizations, and then provide motivational appeal. So these are 5 things that a person who's making a speech to inform their audience typically do to make their speech really good. Okay? That doesn't mean you're going to do this in every speech, but these are 5 typical things that people do to make their speech really work or really achieve their goals. Because remember, the point is not to just give a speech. The point is to give a speech that does something, and it's effective, that does the job that it was designed to do. So if your job is to inform, and people, and you're not clear, then people do not understand what it is that you're trying to inform them about. Okay? So let's talk about clarity just for a moment. Clarity. Clarity has to do with 2 aspects the authors highlight for us: effective organization and a careful selection of words. So if you're not organized, let's say you have good points, okay, good points, good ideas. Let's say you found a way to explain something, but you're not organized. You can't present it in a fashion that people can follow. Then the clarity is going to be lost. Let's say there's 45 things that you've learned that you really want everyone to know. Guess what? They're never going to remember 45 things, and by the time you're done with number 20, they're going to be asleep because they have no idea where you're going with that. But what if you were to group them together into groups, and all of a sudden they're organized, and now it's easier to take even a large amount of ideas or points, well, not that I would ever suggest you try to do 45 things of something in a speech, but sometimes you may have to. Now, the second aspect is the careful selection of words. The more precise you are with your words, the more clear you are in your word choices, the more people understand what you're trying to say. Because, I can show you a video of a speech where a guy goes on for 5 minutes, and he actually speaks English and everything is fine, and you listen to him, and at the end of the speech, you have no idea what he just said. But he's been talking for 5 minutes. So how is that possible? It's possible because he uses words, but he uses such words that can mean so many different things, and he uses them in such an unclear way, and his sentences are so long and constructed so badly that you can't follow. So even though he fills up 5 minutes of speech, you walk away and you say, I have no idea what this man just said. Well, I heard the words he said, but I don't know what they mean. I don't know what he was trying to achieve by his speech. Was he telling me to do this, or was he telling me to do that? Was he trying to explain this, or I don't know what he was trying to explain because he never told me what his topic was. He's just leaving it for me to guess. So if you don't have a clear central idea, then what's going to happen? So this is the kind of problems that we run into with clarity. All right, so organization and then selecting proper words, good vocabulary, right phrases, good choices. So point number 1 that the authors make in this textbook that's very valuable for you is limit your points. If you're going to make a speech that's going to communicate 3 or 4 or however many different things, they suggest that you limit it to 3 or 4, not more than that. If you're going to go 5, you're going to go 7, people are going to forget it. Don't even think about a list of 10. That's just, it's not that people are too dumb and they're not going to understand it. They're going to understand everything you say if you make those points well. The problem is they won't remember it. And if they won't remember it, then it will not stand out in their mind. So you're going to lose some of that information in the middle of a speech. So is it possible for you to reduce the number of points that you're making? Yes, it is. And that means you may have to set slightly different goals in your speech, and that's okay. So 3 or 4 principal ideas is what you do, okay? Another aspect that the authors highlight in this chapter that you need to be aware of and need to understand and learn how to use is using transitions. What are transitions? Can anyone explain to me what is a transition in a speech? Transition. No? It's not transmission. Okay. Transition. What is a transition?
For example, however, therefore, in other words, in
Excellent. So you're just giving me examples of transitions. You can't define it, but you're giving me examples, which is fine. I understand it. That's perfect. That's exactly what I want to hear. Transitions are keywords or key phrases that you use to let an audience know that you're moving from one point to another, or that you're making a conclusion to a set of ideas that you have just presented. That's what transition is. So if I'm making a point and I say therefore, you know that once I say therefore, that means I'm getting ready to sum up and make a conclusion of some sort. Because that's a transition word that lets you know what my next step is. See? Or I could make a point and I can say, in other words, so if I say in other words, what am I trying to do? I'll say this and this and this, blah, 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 blah. In other words, I'm going to repeat the same thing, but in different words, and I'm going to reiterate what I just said, just in other words. It's exactly what it is. I'm just going to re-explain it by using different words. Now, why would I do that? Because I'm afraid that maybe the meaning is not 100% clear the first time. It's an insurance policy that my listeners actually get it. So, yeah, so these are transition words. If I say first, and then I go second, and I go third, and fourth, I'm transitioning from my point number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. And you know, I told you I was going to tell you 3 things about, dangers of drunk driving or something like that. And then I go fourth, and you're like, wait a minute. Fourth? You promised 3 things. That's supposed to be done. You're supposed to be done. You said 3 things, not 4 things. So this is where transitions actually help you organize, and your listeners that are tracking with you, they know what you're saying. If you told them you're going to say 3 things, then they're looking for 1, 2, 3 in your speech somewhere. If you don't provide them those 1, 2, 3, they might still be looking and wondering. So you'd better do that. It's helpful to you. Now, another advice that the writers of this textbook give you is keep the speech moving forward. A lot of times people get stuck in a speech where they just kind of keep repeating the same thing over and over. They reiterate the same point. They keep defining and redefining the same idea because they have not planned it out very well. But keeping the speech moving forward means knowing your structure and following your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or however many points that you've designed, and using those transitional words to let them know, hey, I've just transitioned from one point to the other. See, if I listen to you for too long, going over the same topic, I'm waiting for you to move on because I already got it. I understand what you said. I'm ready for the next one. And I keep waiting for next, or, my second point, or, the second thing I was going to explain. I keep waiting for, where's that second point coming? So I would get bored otherwise. So if you keep it moving forward and letting people know where you are in your speech, then they're more interested. They're tuning in better. Okay? Another aspect that the chapter highlights is using the proper vocabulary and not making it too technical. There's a lot of times that in this class that I use words that are somewhat technical. And I ask you, do you know what this word means? And sometimes you do know, sometimes you don't know, and that's okay. It's perfectly fine. But that's the reason why I ask, because I can't get away from the fact of teaching something new, something you haven't studied before, without using proper terminology, because there is specific terminology tied to this type of content. But I don't know if you know it or not. Now, if I could get away with using less confusing terms, I probably would. And that's exactly what I suggest you do. If you can avoid using terminology that you think people might not know, then avoid it. Use simpler words. This is the feature. Usually speech is supposed to be simpler than a written word. So it's perfectly fine to sway away from more technical terms and stay in the more colloquial style of speaking. If you can simplify your speech whenever it's possible, do it. Make it as simple as you can. It's not going to dumb it down. It's actually going to make it easier for people to comprehend. I think it was Albert Einstein who said once that if you can't explain it to a 12-year-old, you don't understand it. That's what he said. If you can't explain it simply, that means you yourself do not understand it. Think about it. A lot of times people say things, and I ask them, well, what does that mean? And they can't explain it to me. And the reason why they can't explain it to me is because they don't fully grasp the idea themselves. They're saying it because they want to sound smart or something like that, or they heard it somewhere, but they can't explain it to me in simple terms, and that means they don't get it. So if you can simplify it, do. There are some things that are technical and you can't simplify, but then there's other things you can. And then complex ideas should be repeated. Now this is a big important point. If there is a concept or an idea that you're trying to communicate that is very hard for people to understand, you know they're going to get stuck on that. You know you get stumbled. Maybe some special term, maybe a new way of doing something. You might want to repeat it a couple of times, and that's perfectly fine. People will not be insulted that you repeated something complicated a couple of times. That's perfectly fine. Let's see. There's some really good examples here, by the way, in the little boxes for you. I don't know if you get a chance to use these boxes. The one that I like a lot is on this page 193, when it says speaking of skills. And so it explains the information overload when you have, when you're making a speech and you have supporting materials, and you have like PowerPoint or something like that, and you're going to show this chart and that chart, and give that example and show this case. A lot of times we overload people with information. We simply give them too much. So again, the idea is, can you simplify it? Can you make it simple? And so here's the several steps that they say. Sample it. If you got 13 great examples, don't give 13 great examples. Pick a couple and leave the rest away. Why? Because we may not need 13 great examples to illustrate something. A couple will do. Maybe all of them are awesome. We'll just pick the best, okay? And see which ones you think will work for your audience. Now, another one is rotate. It says, use some of the examples this time and other examples when another time. Another is table it. It says we have too much information. You might just have to do away with it altogether. If you can't communicate it simply, get rid of it. Find another way. Don't use what you've got, because people will get lost in it. And the other one is distributed. That one I shared with you before. If you have a complicated topic and a complicated matter that you're trying to communicate, maybe something technical, maybe a big chart with lots of little details, you may just have to print it out and give it out to people so they have it in their hands and they can see it exactly what it is. Okay? So sometimes, maybe even after a speech, they can look at your stuff. Okay? But these are different techniques of simplifying or clearing out some of the informational fog that sometimes settles in. All right. So these are some of the techniques. We're talking about clarity. Here's another side of making a good speech to inform. And that's associating new ideas with familiar ones. We already talked about this before in class. This is called familiarity acceptance pattern, where basically people will accept a new idea if you build it on something they already know. But if they know nothing about something that you're talking about, it's very hard for them to associate it. So you have to give people something to grab onto, okay? That could be a relevant experience that they might have had, or an image that you can explain, that you could say an analogy or a metaphor, anything. So like, for example, if I explain to people pie charts, and I say, okay, this is a great chart to explain like percentages, and people say, oh no, I just like it, 10%, 20%, 40%, whatever, I like it linear. I say, look how much more easy it is visual. Well, why is it called a pie chart? Because it looks like a pie. So you just take a picture of a pie and start slicing it. In the classes in statistics, for example, I had a professor just bring a pie and start slicing it for the students and explaining it that way. Guess what? It's really stuck. Why? Because it's a physical example and it works really well. Something people could relate to. They would never forget what a pie chart is, ever, because a guy brought pie to class. It just works. So when you associate something that that is new for people with something they already know about that particular topic, you're creating a link that they can follow. Their mind is now grabbing onto this idea. Now, another technique is to cluster ideas. Cluster. What do I mean by clustering ideas? What does the word cluster mean? When I say cluster, what do I mean? What do you think? What do you think the word cluster means? Many?
Yeah.
And then put together.
Yeah.
There you go. That's what cluster. Cluster of grapes, for example. Grapes, lots of little berries, right? One branch, but they're all together in a bunch. Now, they're not spread out all over the tree. They're on the vine, hanging together in a cluster. And that's what you want to do. If you have a lot of really good ideas, you may want to make one cluster of ideas, then another cluster of ideas, then another cluster of ideas. So that way, if you have 30 things to explain, instead of doing 30 all in one, you group them in groups of 10, and you say, okay, this is a cluster, this is a cluster, this is a cluster. Again, I'm using large numbers and things like that, but you can put them, and that way I only have 3 points which are made out of 10. So I clustered them, I grouped them together, okay? Again, there's a magic number about clusters, and the magic number is 3 to 7. If you cluster your points, if you cluster your ideas, if you cluster your examples or anything you're trying to show or demonstrate to people, 3 to 7 is the magic number. More than 7, people will not remember. 3, they'll remember easily. 4, they'll remember. 5, pretty good. When you get 6 and 7, maybe they'll forget 1 or 2. But that's okay because they still remember most of it. All right? They're going to remember 3 or 4 easy. It's everything else. So your effectiveness goes down the larger the numbers are. But the idea is that 3 to 7 is your magic number. If you go beyond that, your effectiveness really, really goes down. All right, now there is another device that you can use. I don't know if you heard of this or used this ever, or seen this even used. It's called a mnemonic device. Mnemonic device. Do you guys know what a mnemonic device is? Stephen, you know what mnemonic device is? Never heard of it?
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it, okay. So who knows what a mnemonic device is? Give an example of a mnemonic device or something.
One of the example is like spring forward, pull back.
That's it, yeah, excellent. So we just had time change, right? Spring forward, full back. So that means in spring we go 1 hour forward in changing clocks. In fall we go 1 hour back. See, that's a mnemonic device to remember how to change your clocks, right? That is a mnemonic device. That's an excellent illustration of mnemonic device. That's perfect. Great job. So there are lots of mnemonic devices there in speech. How can you use a mnemonic device in speech like that? Guess what? I've known people who are making a speech and each one of their points, they're making, let's say, 3 points. It begins with the same word, let's say, or uses the same word. Something like, speak up, or stand up, or shut up. It's like whatever. They're going to keep using the word up in every one of their points. So if I have 3, 4, 5 points that I want to say, each time I'm going to use a mnemonic device of using the word up. And you're going to remember my points better because I am using this as my mnemonic device. Or I may use something called alliteration sometimes. People use, this is another mnemonic device, where if I'm making a speech and my speech does this, it spells the word stop, right? And my first point would begin with letter S, my second point would begin letter T, and then O, and then P, right? So whatever I'm teaching you about is going to spell stop. And that could be my central idea. That could be my central idea. So these are devices, again, all of these are organizational devices that help you, they would help you as an audience, but they would also help the speaker to stay on point, to stay on task. Because if I can remember my own structure of a speech, I don't need notes, I don't need outlines, I got it. I can manage it. So that's the idea. These are great, great mnemonic devices. I mean, I've seen them used in a variety of different ways, and they're cool. They're really cool. You have to be creative to create your own devices like that. And then another helpful tools is visualizations. Now we talked about media last time, so that's one form of visualization. What other form of visualization I can use as I'm delivering a speech? What kind of visualization I can give you when I'm delivering a speech? Think. What can I give you to visualize besides a PowerPoint or YouTube or something like that?
Example?
An example? Example is good, yeah. Example helps you clarify. But remember what visualization has to do with? Has to do with you seeing something, not just hearing it. Examples help you by hearing it. You understand something better because I explained it by using a real life situation. Huh?
You can write down a number.
Write down a number. Number is good. So number is visualization. Number will do it. I can use a visual aid. I can use an item to help you understand something. Okay? I can draw on the board, right?
Yes.
To help you understand something. Sometimes I may write a word, sometimes I may draw a picture. These are visualizations. I may demonstrate something. I may do an action for you. Okay? I may say, have any one of you ever seen river dance? And you say, I have no idea what river dance is. And I just start doing a river dance. And you're like, oh, okay, now I know what river dance is. I did a visualization for you. Okay? So visualizations are very powerful to add to your speech. Very effective, again, in doing what? In bringing clarity. Because if I can give you a speech on river dance, and you've never ever seen a river dance in your life, wouldn't it be cool if I just showed it to you once, right? Because that would be a lot easier for you to say, okay, now I know exactly what it is. You guys don't know what I'm talking about when I say river dance, right? Do you? It's Irish kind of style of dancing. It's kind of cool. Very unusual. All right. And then, so the last point that I wanted to kind of, hammer in on the effectiveness of your speech is the providing a motivational appeal. This is how you close your speech. When you close your speech, you bring your central point out again, right? So remember, you begin, you say, all right, I promised that I was going to inform you about river dance. Say, so now I have informed you about river dance. So that could be, one way of ending a speech. You don't have to say it necessarily like that, but the idea is that you can appeal for an audience to hear you out in a particular issue because something benefits them in some way. So you can close a speech a little bit more imaginatively than that. There are different types of motivational appeals. We'll speak more in detail later on about different types of motivational appeals, but what if I told you that all of you can be motivated by a handful of things to listen to my speech? I can construct a speech, and I can pretty much use certain devices or techniques to make you listen to me. In fact, your brain would you might not want to listen to me, but your brain would want to listen to me. Because I would be motivating you in the kind of way in which every human being is motivated. There are certain things that all people want. And I can tap into that and make you listen. Which is why some speeches are very predictable and they begin the same way and they flow in the same way, because they're appealing, they're motivating you to listen in a very specific way. Most people care about basic needs of life. Happiness, success, food, drink, their security. You know, if I can scare you, and you're going to want to listen to me because I'm going to tell you how to not be scared. But first I'm going to scare you. Say something scary, and then I'm going to tell you, you know, there's a way to avoid that. And then all of a sudden you're listening. Why? Because I just scared you. And you don't know how to deal with it now. But I'm going to give you the answer how. Of course you're going to listen to me now. I'm going to spell out a really terrible future. You know, I'm going to tell you that we're going to destroy the world in 5 years. And if you all just recycle one can, all of a sudden everything's going to get great. You know, these kinds of things work. Why? Because they appeal to our needs, to our understanding that, hey, I'm being threatened. Something terrible is going to happen to me. So all of a sudden I'm paying attention. I'm listening because that has to do with me, not just some other guy out there. This has affected me. So things like that. So we all, human beings, have motivational centers is what they're called. And so we can talk a little bit more about that a little later. But essentially, closing in with a motivational appeal or including a motivational appeal to sort of say to try to focus on those basic human needs or interests is an effective technique as well in making a speech to inform. Because if your speech is not interesting to your audience, after all, they're not motivated to listen to it. It's not appealing, they're not going to listen to it.